Hi, this is Dave from SUV Dad, and today I want to go over some of the equipment I used when I was recently out at Lake Arrowhead, and the weather was really cold. It was generally in the upper 20s to low 30s, and we were staying in a cabin that didn't have any central heat. There was a heating blanket, which my kids used to sleep in the bed within the cabin, and we had a propane space heater, but I didn't use that the first night because I wasn't really sure how safe it would be to use a propane heater overnight. Eventually I found out that it actually had a carbon monoxide alarm included in the space heater, so I used it the second night, but then in the middle of the night on the third night the heater ran out of propane, so all of one night and then basically half of another night I slept without any real heat source in my sleeping bag. So we were outdoors a lot. We spent a lot of time sledding and skating and building snowmen and having snowball fights. It was really my kids' first time spending a lot of time outdoors in the snow. We've been snow tubing before. We did that last winter, but that was only for a couple hours. But this is actually a good solid 3.5, almost 4 days out in the cold. So what I want to do is show you all of the gear that I use to stay warm. I never had any issues at all with ever feeling cold. I'm someone who generally, like, my feet or my fingers and hands can get cold, but I didn't really have that problem at all during this trip, and so I want to share some of the equipment that I used. So if you have any trips planned where you're going to be going somewhere where it's cold and you don't necessarily have the gear, I'll share some gear that worked really well for me that can maybe help you, so you'll be able to stay warm and enjoy your time outdoors in the snow and in the cold. Now, the first thing I want to share with you are these darn tough socks. I got these at REI, and I actually have 3 pairs of them, and I was planning my trip. We went out to Lake Arrowhead, and I actually forgot to bring 2 of them, so I just had 1 pair with me, and I wore them the entire time during the trip. And these socks are great. My feet stayed warm. I was going back and forth between 2 different pairs of shoes, and sometimes within the cabin there was some snow melt, so the socks got a little wet. But I never had any issues at all with my feet feeling cold. So these socks, compared with the 2 pairs of shoes that I wear, were really effective in keeping my feet warm. And again, I'm someone who generally, my feet, my toes tend to feel cold. So these worked really well. I would highly recommend them. And the other nice thing is, after wearing them for 3.5, 4 days, they didn't really stink. So they do a really good job as far as preventing any sort of odor. So I'd highly recommend these darn tough socks. And again, I got them from REI, and I'll share the link in the description for the video. As far as general just pants, what I wore driving up to Lake Arrowhead, and if we weren't going to be playing around in the snow where I wasn't at the risk of getting my legs wet, I wore these 5 Sprag pants from the North Face. And these pants were nice. I wouldn't say they necessarily were great as far as like getting them wet or anything along those lines, but they were fine for just wearing when I was out and about doing things. I never really felt cold. I felt totally comfortable. So these are good just like if you want to wear them when you're going around town, not necessarily snowboarding or snow tubing or sledding or doing anything like that. I'm not sure how well they hold up in those situations, but if you're just going to be out and about in the cold, these pants worked perfectly fine. As far as shirts go, I like to stick with a very basic base layer, something nice and short that wicks moisture away from your body. And I'm a big fan of these Old Navy shirts. They're super cheap. You can generally get them for about $10 or so. And I always wear these as a base layer. They're super comfortable. They're great at wicking moisture away from you. And they're super cheap. So I've got like a bunch of these. They're like $10 a pop. And they work really well as a base layer. So I'd highly recommend this Old Navy shirt. For my next layer that goes above that base layer t-shirt, I really like this Patagonia Capilene Air Crew shirt. It's a great shirt. It is a little pricey, I'll admit, but it's very lightweight, it's extremely comfortable, and it does a really nice job keeping you nice and warm. So I've actually got a few of these. I've been fortunate enough to get them for the past 2 holiday seasons. This year I got this blue one. Last year I got a black one, and then I also got a gray one on my own, spent my own money on it. So something I think very highly of. I've got 3 of them, and one of them I actually paid for on my own. The other 2 are holiday gifts, but this is a great shirt. I wear it around the house. I've worn it camping. I wear it going to sleep when I camp, and I'm in my sleeping bag. Extremely comfortable, very, very good at keeping you warm. Very big fan of this particular Patagonia shirt. And then as far as jackets go, this is pretty much your basic run-of-the-mill fleece from the North Face. And this held up really well. I used this a lot when we were out in the snow, And while there would get some snow on it, it never really felt like it got really damp and uncomfortable. It kept me very warm, never had any issues at all with feeling cold. I wore it over my t-shirt, which was my base layer. I also wore it over that Patagonia, the Capilene Air Crew shirt that I was wearing. And so these 3 layers alone were plenty for being out, again, upper 20, low 30s weather, lots of snow, small amounts of wind. I wouldn't say there was a lot of wind there, but you're primarily dealing with the cold and also dealing with the snow. And this worked just fine. I had another jacket I used when it started raining, and I'll show you that in a minute. But this is the jacket that I wore for the bulk, the vast majority of the time that I was in the cold, and this jacket held up really well. So I'd highly recommend this fleece jacket from the North Face, and I will share a link within the description. Now, when I was out in the snow and was sledding and knew that my legs were going to potentially get wet, they're going to be in the snow, I used these North Face Snow Pants, and they worked really, really well. Never felt like I got wet at all. They held up really nicely. They're not the high-end ones. You know, North Face obviously is expensive. There are some that are a higher price point. For instance, their Future Light stuff is really expensive. This is not that. This is probably one of the most basic. I think it was maybe about $100. So, you know, pricey, but it's going to keep you warm. And if you're someone that's going to be out in the snow a lot, I'd highly recommend getting a pair of snow pants. And these are kind of like the sweet spot as far as not being very pricey, but definitely being worth the cost and helping to make sure that you're comfortable and you're having a great time and you're not constantly concerned about getting cold or not being able to enjoy your time out in the snow and in the cold. Now, on our final day up around Lake Arrowhead, we got a lot of rain. It rained pretty much from 4 p.m. on Wednesday before we left, and rained all night long until Thursday when we were getting ready to leave our cabin. And we could hear the snow from the trees falling all night long on the cabin, and it was a pretty wild night. But there was a ton of rain, and it continued to rain when we were leaving that cabin on Thursday. And so I wasn't so sure how well the North Face fleece would hold up with all the water and just getting a lot of water on it. So I went with this North Face jacket. I got it last year. I got it when it was on clearance. I believe it's called the Sickline, and this is great for any type of snow, whether you're doing tubing, you're doing snowboarding, you're doing sledding, because it's waterproof. But the main use I got of it, I didn't really use it when we were out sledding. The fleece I was using worked just fine. But when there was a bunch of rain coming down, I went with this jacket, and it worked phenomenally. Didn't have any issues at all with rain on me. This, combined with the snow pants that I showed a minute ago, kept me dry the entire time, going and packing our car as far as taking things from our cabin into the car as we're getting ready to leave the cabin. This worked out really well, so I'd highly recommend this particular jacket, whether you're in the snow or even in the rain. I'm not sure if it's still available. I got it when it was on clearance, but the Sickline, I think it's a line that they still carry some of their products, and anything that is from North Face that is waterproof and rated for waterproof and rated for colder weather, I think you'd be perfectly fine using any of those items. So now let's talk about gloves. Like I mentioned before, I'm someone where my hands and my fingers definitely get cold when I'm out and about, so I needed a really good pair of gloves. And unfortunately, these gloves are expensive, but at least if you're going to pay for a good pair of gloves, they should work. And these worked really well for me. I got these Outdoor Research high camp gloves. I got them from REI, and they're kind of a unique design. There's just the regular part, kind of like a mitten, but then your index finger and your thumb are separate, which makes it a little easy to grab things. That worked out really nicely. The one downside to these gloves is they have both a liner and they have a shell. And if you're taking them on and off, like I was taking pictures of my kids, then the liner can be difficult to kind of keep in place, and it comes out. And so what you have to do is put on the liner by itself and then pop the glove on. And if you have the other glove on and it's a little wet from the snow, it can be a little bit of a challenge to get it on. Now, my hands are obviously fully dry, so that was super easy. But if you do a lot of taking it off and pulling it back on, if it's dry, that works really easily. But if you're in wet conditions and you start doing that again and again, what happens is the liner starts coming out. So it's a little bit of a pain point, but it's not a huge deal. If you're taking lots of pictures and you're taking gloves on and off, that's going to be the scenario where it's going to be, I think, the least effective. If you're not worried about taking pictures and you're just going to put them on, you're going to keep these gloves on, they work super well. They also have this nice little drawstring here, which you can tighten them up if you want to, so they stay nice and tight. It's got a little bit kind of like a skirt here, so it obviously goes over your jacket that you would have here, which would help to prevent the snow from getting inside there. And it's super easy to loosen it up. If you just go like that, it'll loosen right up. So I'd highly recommend these gloves. I'm someone whose hands get very cold for whatever reason. I don't know why it is. I don't know if it's age or what the case may be. But these gloves held up really well. Like I said, we were out and about for 3.5, 4 days, playing in the snow a lot. And I was very happy with these gloves. I think they're probably about $100. So they're very expensive. But again, if you want to be able to go out and spend a lot of time outdoors in the snow and enjoy yourself, I think it's worth the cost. I got these from REI, and I'll put a link in the description. All right, now to wrap this up, I'm going to go over the 2 pairs of shoes, actually 1 pair of hiking shoes and 1 pair of boots that I wore during our trip up to Lake Arrowhead. And again, this is all equipment I bought on my own, so I bought it, I put it to the test, and I'm telling you, the equipment that I like that kind of really held up and I would definitely vouch for and will use again on future trips. So the first pair of shoes that I wore, just kind of wearing them, driving up, and just if we're just kind of walking around, not really doing anything where we're going to get into the snow too much, are these shoes. These are the North Face. They're called the Activist. I've had them since last February, and I pretty much just use them when I'm out when it rains. I use them pretty much as a rain shoe to kind of protect my feet from the rain. And they're great for just wearing around if there's going to be rain, but not necessarily any snow. So that would be the primary situation where I'd use these, would be in rain, but not any snow. Next, I have the Columbia Lift Top 3. I got these from REI when they were on clearance. And this is a boot that I wore last year when we went snow tubing. And for a couple hours, it worked perfectly fine. But I really put them to the test this past trip when we went up to Lake Arrowhead because we're in the snow for 3.5, 4 days. And this boot held up really, really well. I was very happy with it. My feet never got cold. They never got wet. This is a great boot. Works out really nicely. If it's still available at REI, last time I got it, it was on clearance, so it was a really good price as far as the discount goes. And again, if you can find this boot, I'd recommend it. Obviously, there's tons of other boots that you can use, but I can say I've used this one in 2 different situations of being in the snow. And in both situations, my feet were completely warm. Never had any issues at all. So this boot combined with the Darn Tough socks worked out really well for me. I was very happy with my experience when we've been able to go out and play in the snow and be in the cold, and I had no issues at all. So thanks for watching this video. Hopefully you found some equipment that will help you during your next adventure when you go out into the snow and into the cold. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comment section. And if you like the type of content I'm producing as far as the types of reviews I've been creating, please consider subscribing and clicking the like button. That helps me realize what type of content you appreciate the most and you would like to see more of. Thanks, and I'll see you on the next one.